"You humiliated me in front of my daughter," he whispered. "But I still took the bullet meant for you." She turned, pale and trembling, as the man she'd mocked hours ago lay bleeding on the concrete, clutching her badge in his bloodied hand. His only words were, "Tell her I didn't hesitate." Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. It was 7:12 a.m. when Elijah Burke stepped into the downtown Phoenix diner with grease still on his jeans and his daughter's mismatched lunchbox in hand. The fluorescent lights flickered above like a lazy pulse, humming against the worn booze and the scent of burnt toast. Elijah didn't mind. He was used to places that didn't care what you looked like as long as you paid in cash. Across from him sat Madison, age 8, with her curls tied up like spring coils bouncing with every bite of her peanut butter sandwich. She giggled at something on her worn tablet, a cartoon about a talking sponge, and Elijah smiled quietly, more to himself than anyone else. That's when the cop walked in. Officer Renee Carter, decorated, direct, and known for her no-nonsense demeanor, strode into the diner like it owed her something. She didn't notice the father and daughter until she passed their table and caught sight of Elijah's old mechanic uniform. She hesitated, then scoffed. "You really gonna let her eat that in public?" she muttered, not low enough. Elijah looked up slowly. "Excuse me." "You heard me," she snapped. "You people sit in here for hours, taking up tables, pretending you've got somewhere to go." The whole diner turned quiet. The cashier paused mid-pour. A couple with matching biker jackets glanced over. Elijah didn't raise his voice. He didn't stand. He only looked at Madison, who had stopped chewing, wide-eyed. "You don't talk to my kid like that," Elijah said softly. "She's not the one I'm talking to," Renee replied. "But maybe if you focus more on parenting and less on loafing, you wouldn't be dressed like a floor mat." A man laughed nervously. Madison blinked quickly, her lip trembling. Elijah slowly stood, his full height casting a calm but intimidating shadow. "You wear a badge, ma'am," he said. "So act like it." Renee stared at him, but didn't answer. She walked off. She left behind silence. And Madison whispering, "Daddy, why was she so mean?" Elijah's jaw clenched, but he bent down, wiped a crumb from her cheek, and smiled. "Some people confuse pain for power, baby girl. You just gotta let him trip over their own ego." They finished their breakfast in quiet. Elijah dropped cash on the table and gave the waitress an extra $5 he couldn't afford. He always left kindness where the world tried to take it. Later that afternoon, the Arizona sun boiled over the asphalt like fire in a frying pan. Elijah wiped sweat from his brow as he adjusted the distributor cap on a beat-up blue Honda Civic parked half a block from his garage. His hands moved with calm precision, each calloused finger dancing like it had memorized the engine's heartbeat. Madison sat nearby, drawing dinosaurs in her sketch pad and occasionally humming a tune only kids understood. That's when the siren screamed. From the corner, a police cruiser, flying fast, lights flashing, ripped through the intersection just as a black SUV ran a red light. Time folded. Tires shrieked. Metal slammed metal. And chaos exploded. Elijah dropped his wrench and sprinted without thinking. The cruiser smashed against a pole. Its passenger door crunched like foil. The SUV veered, its hood smoking, and slammed to a stop. Elijah didn't see who was inside it. His eyes were locked on the cop in the driver's seat. It was Renee Carter, and she wasn't moving. Smoke billowed. Screams pierced the heat. And that's when he saw them. Two armed men stumbling out of the SUV, one clutching a rifle. Elijah's lungs froze. It wasn't a traffic accident. It was an ambush. The first man raised his weapon toward the cruiser, toward Renee, and Elijah moved. He leapt forward, grabbed a fallen trash can lid, and hurled it like a discus. It hit the shooter's arm, throwing his aim. The shot went wide. Madison screamed behind him. Elijah didn't stop. He barreled into the first man, taking them both down in a tangle of limbs. The gun skittered away. The second man turned and fired. Pain ripped through Elijah's side like white lightning. But he didn't fall. He lunged toward the cruiser, shielding the door with his body. Renee groaned inside, semi-conscious, blood trailing down her temple. "Stay down," Elijah hissed. Don't move. The second shooter aimed again. Then a deafening crack, and the man dropped. Renee, barely lifting her pistol from inside the car, had fired. Backup arrived seconds later. Officers swarmed. The street filled with screams, sirens, chaos. And Elijah collapsed. He woke up hours later in the ER, stitched, bruised, and pale. Madison clutched his hand, crying quietly. The nurse stepped aside as someone entered the room. Renee Carter. She stood still, no uniform now, just jeans and a shirt stained with dried blood. Her eyes were red, not from injury, from guilt. She spoke after a long silence. What? Elijah looked at her from his bed. His voice cracked. Because my daughter was watching. Renee's lips quivered. I was wrong. Back at the diner. I don't know why I said what I did. Yes, you do, he replied calmly. But now maybe you see people clearer. Tears slipped down her cheeks. You saved me. Took a bullet. No, Elijah said. I just made sure a child didn't watch someone bleed alone. By morning, Elijah Burke's face was everywhere. The gas station TV played the loop again and again, the father leaping into gunfire, shielding a cop who had humiliated him the same morning. The diner owner called it divine irony. Social media turned him into a folk hero overnight. But Elijah didn't care about that. He just wanted to walk again without the stab of pain in his ribs. And he wanted his daughter to stop crying every time he coughed. Madison sat curled in the corner of the hospital room with her sketch pad. She had drawn him with a cape. He didn't tell her that the proportions were all wrong. His neck looked like a tree trunk, and his arms were the size of her school desk. He just said, "That's beautiful, sweetheart." Then the door creaked. Renee stepped in again, this time with someone behind her. A tall man in a tailored gray suit, expensive watch, and a quiet authority that filled the room before he even spoke. He didn't introduce himself right away. He simply handed Elijah a thick folder. Elijah squinted. What's this? The man nodded. Job offer. Full benefits. Department liaison role. You'd work closely with precinct teams in the city, helping us build better community relationships. But more importantly, teaching them what the badge doesn't. Elijah raised an eyebrow. Renee spoke, clearing her throat. It was his idea, after seeing the footage and after I told him what happened in that diner. Elijah looked between them, then slowly closed the folder. I fix engines. I'm not some symbol. You're more than a symbol, the man said. You're a mirror, and this city needs a hard look at itself. Elijah didn't say yes. He didn't say no either. He just leaned back and whispered, "Let me heal first. Then we'll talk." The man nodded. "Take your time, Mr. Burke, but I hope you'll consider it." That night, after the lights dimmed and the nurses made their final rounds, Renee remained behind. She sat in the visitor's chair, hands clasped tightly. "There's something else," she said quietly, "about why I snapped at you in the diner." Elijah blinked at the ceiling. "I don't need an explanation," he murmured. "But I need to say it," she insisted. He didn't stop her. Renee took a breath like it hurt. "My brother looked like you, worked like you. Same jacket, same calloused hands, same smile when he handed over his paycheck. And he died trying to stop a robbery. I saw him on the news, same posture, same stillness. And I never got over it. Every time I see someone like you, I lash out. Because I see him." Elijah turned to face her fully now. "You don't hate people like me," he said softly. "You hate what happened to someone you loved." She nodded. "I never gave myself space to grieve. I just shoved it down and built armor." Elijah didn't offer comfort, just truth. Armor protects, but it also isolates. Renee wiped her eyes. "Why'd you forgive me? I treated you like trash." Elijah didn't hesitate. "Because my daughter was watching. And I don't want her learning hate from anyone, not even me." The next day, Elijah was discharged. The press waited outside the hospital, crowding the sidewalk with microphones and camera flashes like locusts. Elijah carried Madison in one arm, a bag slung over his shoulder, bandage still tight around his ribs. He didn't answer any questions. He just walked to the bus stop like he always did. Except this time, the city watched. They watched a man bleed for a stranger. A man who refused bitterness. A man who taught Phoenix something no badge ever could. 2 weeks later, Elijah returned to his routine, not because his body had healed, but because the rent hadn't paused, and the world never stopped spinning just because your soul had been through hell. The garage smelled like oil and forgotten time. The cracked concrete, the rusted old tools, the transistor radio that only played jazz after 3 p.m. They were all still there, waiting for his silence to fill them again. Madison was back in school. Every morning, Elijah walked her there, limping slightly but holding her hand like it was made of porcelain. Parents who once never made eye contact now offered waves, half smiles, even coffee. But Elijah stayed the same, gracious, quiet, humble. Then, one cloudy Tuesday morning, Renee Carter showed up at the garage. Not in uniform. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a plain t-shirt with a faded print of an old band logo. She looked more human than she ever had. Nervous, too. "I brought donuts," she said, holding up a box like it was a peace treaty. Elijah wiped grease off his hands with a rag and motioned toward the folding chair near his workbench. "I already had my coffee, but Madison will think you're a superhero." Renee sat. She didn't touch the donuts. "I took leave," she said after a pause. "Mandatory. Pending review." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "It's standard. After a traumatic incident and everything that happened, they try to figure out if I'm fit to be back on the streets." "You are," Elijah said flatly. She stared at him. "You don't know that. You walked back into that diner the day after it all happened," he said. "You look people in the eyes. That counts more than a review board's checklist." She sighed, leaning forward. "You're the reason I'm still breathing, and you're the reason I'm learning to feel again." He leaned against the workbench. "Then do me a favor. Anything. When you put that badge back on, wear it for the people who don't get second chances. Be their voice. Be better than they expect." She blinked hard. "I will." 2 nights later, the city council held a community event in Lincoln Park, a candlelight ceremony for victims of violence. Elijah didn't want to go. He hated crowds, hated the way microphones distorted real words, turning pain into performance. But Madison wanted to light a candle for brave people. So he went. What he didn't know was that the mayor had planned to call him on stage. They handed him a plaque that read, "For bravery beyond duty," and a bouquet for Madison. The crowd applauded. A few people cried. Elijah just nodded and whispered, "This isn't mine. I didn't do it for applause." A journalist asked, "Then why did you do it?" He paused, then looked down at Madison. "Because kindness isn't conditional, and cowardice isn't just running away. It's watching someone fall when you had a chance to stand up." The crowd went still. Renee, standing in the back, wiped away a tear. Later, after the lights dimmed and the candles were snuffed out one by one, Renee walked over. "I start training the new recruits next month," she said. Elijah tilted his head. "Teaching them how to shoot." "No," she smiled. "Teaching them how to listen." He grinned. "That's rarer than courage." She tucked her hands in her pockets. "I want you to come in. Talk to them. Tell your side. I'm no teacher. But you're a father," she said. "And they need to learn what it means to protect, not dominate." He hesitated, then nodded. The next week, Elijah stood in front of a dozen fresh-faced cadets in an old classroom with cracked linoleum tiles and windows that rattled when buses passed by. He told them about dignity, about what it costs, and what it buys. He told them that you don't always know who's watching, but someone always is. And he ended with this: "You can wear armor, or you can be a shield. Only one will earn you real trust." They gave him a standing ovation. But Elijah walked out quietly, back to his garage, back to Madison, back to where real heroism waited, not in applause, but in showing up anyway. Months passed. Autumn crept into Phoenix like an apology, warm, soft-edged breezes replacing the furnace blast heat. The garage door creaked less. Madison's sketches got better, and Elijah's limp had faded into something barely noticeable, like the shadow of a scar. People in the neighborhood began to greet him by name. They didn't just wave anymore. They crossed streets to shake his hand, bring him lunch, or ask about oil changes they didn't need just to say thank you. But Elijah didn't let it inflate him. He stayed grounded, until one afternoon, a storm came. Not the kind with thunder, but sirens. Elijah was under a pickup truck when he heard them. 2 blocks down, then shouting, Then shots. He stood slowly, felt it in his ribs again, that phantom ache. From the corner of his eye, Madison's school bus turned onto the block. Something cracked in the air. Gunfire. And Elijah ran. He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. A man with a weapon, desperate, bleeding, trapped, had fled into the street. Officers yelled. Civilians ducked. Children screamed. Madison froze at the edge of the sidewalk, wide-eyed. The man turned toward her, gun in hand, and Elijah stepped in front of his daughter. Again, but this time, it didn't end in blood. Renee Carter's voice bellowed across the scene like a gavel from heaven. Put it down. The man turned and saw her. No badge now, just a vest, a firm stance. A voice that had once been fear now turned into fire. He hesitated and dropped the gun. Renee rushed forward, cuffed him clean, then turned, and found Elijah already lifting Madison off her feet, her arms wrapped tight around his neck. Renee stared. He stared back. I told you, he said softly. You could be a shield. That night, Elijah sat on the hood of his old truck with Madison curled up beside him. She had fallen asleep, clutching his arm. Renee parked quietly at the curb and walked over. You didn't freeze, she said. He smiled. I had too much to lose. She sat beside him, glancing at the stars. You ever think you were meant for something bigger? Elijah looked down at Madison, then shook his head. No, I think I was meant to be right here for her. Renee was quiet, then said something that would stay with him forever. You didn't just save me that day, Elijah. You rewired something in me. You reminded me that strength without grace is just noise. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to, because some victories don't need medals. They just need people who show up when it counts. Final words. Elijah Burke never chased heroism. He just chased the things that mattered. Dignity, truth, and raising a daughter to believe the world could still be kind, because her father was proof of it. And Renee Carter? She became one of the most compassionate, sharp-eyed leaders in the department's history. Not because of the uniform, but because she was once humbled by a man the world called average, but who was anything but. And as for Madison, she grew up telling a story. My dad once took a bullet for someone who insulted him. He didn't do it because he had to. He did it because I was watching. And I've never stopped learning from him since.